Terry, welcome to the Health Path podcast. We finally get to record a conversation. It's been a while.
Yes, yeah, trying to organise things with all the plants emerging at the moment is tricky.
Yeah, you were just saying off air that it's an incredibly busy time for you.
It has been this year, yes, particularly. I think it's been at least 5 years of lots of planning and theory and learning. And this year's it's been really about getting stuff in the ground, getting the seeds germinated and seeing what survived over winter and learning about what the plant's actually doing in the ground. So it's been combining, carrying on with research and learning, but also trying to work out how to apply that in the ground more consistently. So yeah, this year the land has required a lot from me, with the plants themselves, really, with my learning there.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Because I think I first came across your work, as is often the case these days, on social media.
Yeah.
And I just really resonated with some of your content and sort of the way you were looking at things. And I
Mhm.
thought it might be helpful to start with just sharing a little bit of your journey from, where you were to sort of where you are now and how things have evolved for you with your understanding and how you practice as a result.
Okay. Yeah, so I started out, I don't know how far back to go really with this, but it seems pertinent to go back to where my passion kind of began, which was I grew up on a small holding. My parents brought a small holding and I had lots of animals, chickens, ducks, geese, horses, but I was just always out in nature. One of my biggest hobbies was trying to find owl poo, because I found owl poo fascinating. It was just full of like the skeletons of the animals they'd eaten, and you can sort of work. It was just a fascinating thing. But I decided from a young age I wanted to heal nature. I wanted to help nature thrive. I remember sitting in the garden one year. There was a pigeon that had been shot in the church next door, and I just sat holding it, crying and thinking, I want to be a healer. I want to help things get well. And I ended up marrying a hunter, actually, which was a really bizarre sort of contrast, where I became quite balanced in my understanding of people that live off the land and respectfully hunt for food rather than eating, factory farmed animals. But yeah, so I've really lived a whole life of sort of trying to find balance points in everything and really being passionate about healing. And I decided I wanted to go into finding cures for the incurable. I thought that would be a worthy thing to strive for. And I didn't really know how to go about doing that. I went for career advice at school, which is probably the worst thing I could have done. And I was advised to go into industrial pharmacy. So, maybe I was thinking maybe I could go to the Amazon rainforest and discover plants that we haven't discovered yet, or soil organisms and the compounds they make, and I could find medicines and cures for people and the planet. So I started down that route, but soon realized that was not for me. I was not a scientist per se. I loved learning about the science, but I hated looking at it in a laboratory or in a petri dish or in a classroom environment. I liked living science. I like to be out there picking through the owl poo, looking at what actually works on the ground and looking at how nature does it in real time. So I was already on the path, and I'd enrolled in a pharmacy degree. So I carried on with it, and I ended up being a community pharmacist. And because that seemed to give me the contact with people and the people that needed healing and that were coming for advice and guidance. And I really enjoyed that role. I became sort of go-to community medicine woman for all kinds of ailments and things that the doctors didn't necessarily help to heal, but maybe we're just managing and treating, and people were coming to me and actually healing from conditions that mainstream medicine hadn't helped them with. And it was small things like stress reduction, dealing with feeling alone, all kinds of weird things that just, I noticed that I naturally understood what was causing people's problems, more of a root cause. And I was asked by the patients if I could do private consultations or if I'd go out and do my own practice. So I did. And I ended up realizing I was advising people more about soil health and eating foods from healthy soil and eating a diverse diet and talking about the microbiome more than I was anything else. And the food I was advising the people seeing me to buy, they couldn't get, to get food grown on healthy soil, they didn't know where to find it. And I couldn't tell them where to find it, because I myself struggled. So I'd spend my days off driving around to different farms around the country to find plants that had been grown in animals that had been raised on soil that actually looked like it was alive. And so this was really distressing to me, is that we've got this obvious elephant in the room, that we're treating all of these diseases in these complicated ways, and we're doing all these complex tests and trying to go around the houses to heal. And nobody's really looking at how do we get the healthy soil so that the plants are healthy and the animals are healthy and our diet is more nutrient dense. And wouldn't that just solve a lot of the problems without us worrying about anything else? So at that point, I thought someone's got to do something about that. So I became interested in market garden growing and permaculture. And then I discovered that there are these 1,500 plus varieties of edible species of plants in the UK. And we grow, 20 to 30 varieties as a common thing. And I thought, why are we not growing these plants in our own gardens? Why aren't we eating our own gardens? And there's a forest garden in Cornwall. It was planted in 1989 with over 1,500 varieties of edible or useful plants. Wow. And it was just, nobody's really visiting it. No one's learning about it. It's not being supported by anybody. And that was the original Plants for a Future site that's planted by Ken and Ariadne Fern, and they wrote the book Plants for a Future. And that site was sort of largely not really being valued in my mind. So I was thinking, this ideal situation of how we could be helping healthy soils is by planting more permanent, combined with annual crops. So having these edible forest gardens or forage gardens, if you've not got room for trees, alongside heritage varieties of vegetables and obviously livestock integrated in some way. So I set up Biome Box as a way to basically ask growers, can you grow these perennial vegetables for me? Can you plant a forest garden for me, or a forage garden of just weird and unusual perennials and herbs? And I will buy the produce and sell it through a veg box. So it's a totally novel kind of idea for market gardeners. And so the market gardener I'm working with now, so he's a no-dig market gardener. He's already agroecological minded, no chemicals and sprays on the land. He puts sheep on as well around the edge. So there's some sort of livestock fertility going on there. I really like what he does. And asked him if he could start growing some perennials for me. And so he's planted about 4 last year, just to see how they went. And he supplied them in the box this year for the first time, because obviously they weren't ready last year. So he's really excited about increasing the amount of plants that he's growing on the land. And that's giving him that financial resilience as well, as that extra stream of income on top of his veg box that he's supplying to the local community. So Biome Box originally started out as a way of, researching how we could be getting healthier soils and getting plants from healthier soils, and ended up being, it sort of knits together so many threads of the need for economic viability for growers, the need for diversity for wildlife and the soil and our gut, and the evolution of life in the soil and above ground. And it just provides this model that actually, if we could embrace it with all market gardeners and all of the small scale growers, we really have a viable solution for human health. So that's where it is. I mean, at the moment, it's just a veg box of perennial produce, alongside some annual crops that are grown in an agroecological manner, and wild foods as well. So because I wanted to incorporate more wild edibles into people's spaces. So that's all it is at the moment, but we have plans for what we'd like it to become, with education and combining soil microbiome with the gut microbiome, helping people understand the connection between the two, and really sort of being, I suppose, a thought leader in that area. So we're more of an educational service than we are a veg box.
Right. That's amazing. Very it feels very sort of entrepreneurial. You've kind of found a need and you've just gone for it.
Yes, yeah, but I think it's in reverse, I guess, for us, because I wasn't looking at where is there a need, what would people pay for. I was just following what we needed for human health.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so it was kind of I wasn't doing it to find a business. I was just earning my money doing my other stuff. So, and this is where it now needs to sort of start emerging and evolving in that way, so I can spend more time being financially funded to do this work rather than. So it's a time for convergence for me of all the different threads of what I'm doing, so that I can be paid for what I'm doing with this, as well as put everything into it.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are on that kind of path at the moment, is working out how to merge those strands of like bridging the worlds of where we've been and the paradigm shift that we're in, and the realizations that we're all having about the simplicity of health, and how we really need to have more of a hands-off approach, and how do we earn a living from having this hands-off approach, with basically making ourselves redundant in the old frame. But the new frame, we're very much, dealing with stewarding the land and hands in the dirt and learning about nature in real time and sharing that education. And people are hungry for that information. They're really interested about what they could grow in their own gardens and whatnot. Definitely. So yeah. And just to clarify, not that it was a bad thing, but those two statements I shared were very much two different statements in regards to the sort of entrepreneurial side, and then you going for it. You saw a need in the sense that there was a lack of knowledge, there was a lack of need to access this stuff. And I think that's really quite courageous ultimately as well. But I'm fascinated by this idea that, there are 1,500 edible plants in the UK. It's something I've been reflecting on quite a lot recently, just around even the practical things of going shopping and how many different countries is my food coming from, and becoming increasingly for want of a better word, concerned, and trying to reduce that impact. So are you able to share some of your, I guess, learnings around both things like the connection between soil and gut microbiome, and what we might be able to do in our own gardens to support some of this stuff? Yeah. So, obviously one of the most sort of popular or well-known pieces about the gut microbiome is obviously it works well with polyphenolic compounds. So foods, eat the rainbow is one of the most common things that we hear in terms of supporting the gut microbiome, because of the range of plant-based compounds that are in those different pigments and plants. So having this diversity of plants is essential for feeding the different range of organisms that live inside the gut. And this is something I sort of cycle around as well, is that the more diversity we have in the gut, the more harmony emerges. Because if you have different organisms that are competing with each other, some that are supporting each other, some that are evolving each other, you've got various organisms connecting in all different ways. And out of that, you can't get any one organism that manages to get massively out of control. So it's all about this diversity and this harmony that emerges from diversity. And that's a big part of what I want to teach with Biome Boxes, is importance of this diversity. Everything in moderation. So it's not about having any one particular plant that's good for a particular organism, because we really don't know what we're dealing with when we start to say, well, this organism is beneficial, let's increase the amounts of that one. No, you're just going to create an imbalance, and it might be beneficial now in the current petri dish system that you're looking at, but in 5 years' time, it might become a pathogen. And if you're supporting people's guts to be overwhelmed with that particular organism because you think it's good, you're setting people up for problems. So everything's around diversity. And so in our own back gardens, if we can be consuming a range of polyphenolic compounds or plant-based compounds fresh, literally straight, go into the garden and I just graze in the garden. So we've got perennial kales, I've got Alexanders in there at the moment. I've got Chinese artichokes and skirrets and all sorts of things. I let dandelions grow. There's blackberry shoots and leaves. I don't let the blackberries grow too big, but I cut them back so that they reshoot and I can eat the new shoots. I just grazed, and this is a great way of diversifying the gut microbiome because of the variety of compounds. And also different plants have different capacities to overcome bacteria and virus and fungal infections. So they have those, they don't necessarily dampen down one type of bacteria. So you can eat a range of so lavender. I eat lavender leaves. That has quite a strong antibacterial set of compounds in there. So I wouldn't want to eat loads of it, but a little bit of it keeps certain bacteria colonies controlled. And then, so overall, by eating all these diverse plants in our gardens each day, we're stopping certain organisms getting out of control. We're feeding a diversity of organisms, so there's complexity and there's ability for the organisms to work together. And it's fresh from your garden, so it's literally full of life force. It's not been picked, a week before or 3 days before and shipped across, the sea. It's there. It's on your land, and that brings me to a really crucial point, is that we need to be eating from the land that we're living on. Not totally. I do agree that we should be importing some nice foods, some luxury things, some nuts and some fruits, and that adds to the diversity. And that's part of human culture's evolution, is being able to enjoy trade with each other and enjoy one another's cultures. It enhances the quality of life for everyone. So I'm not a thing of 100% eat from your own local community. That's the bulk of it should come from local. But culture is supposed to be about quality of life too. So growing these things in our own garden means we're eating the microbes from our own garden and land. And that brings the connection between the soil health and the gut microbiome, because soil microbes are, in 1 teaspoon of soil, you've got, obviously ridiculous amounts of microbes. I can't even remember the number of them now, because I'm totally just in the soil nowadays, and I kind of switch my head off most of the time now. But yeah, so we've got this. The soil is so full of microbes, and they're constantly evolving in their relationships with each other, in which ones are predominant, which ones are being controlled, which ones are producing antibiotic-like compounds, and which ones are secreting sugars to feed other. They're doing all kinds of things all of the time, but they're evolving. Their genetic information is being exchanged constantly between these microbes in the ground, and those microbes obviously then are also exchanging information with the microbes on the plants. And when we eat those plants, that genetic information from the soil makes its way into our own gut. So if, for example, there is a massive overgrowth, there's been just some disturbance of the soil or some disturbance of the ecosystem, maybe, massive glyphosate exposure in a certain part of the environment that you're living in, or maybe there's been some chemicals brought in the rain or something, there's been some disruption to the ecosystem. The microbes in the soil will very quickly get to work in how to deal with those chemical compounds, how to rebalance that ecosystem. And there might be a certain microbe that explodes for a while as that chemical or compound is dealt with. And then in people, if they are exposed to that ecosystem, they could then become overrun with that particular microbe or organism, because the whole ecosystem is adapting to increase the numbers of that microbe to clean the area. But then if you keep eating from that area, the microbes are then starting to evolve and share information on how to bring that microbe back under control again. So if you're eating from the land, then you are part of the evolutionary pathway of how to bring these chemicals back under control, and then how to bring the organisms back under control when the situation is back to being balanced again. And as I say, that's through genetic exchange largely of the microbes between the soil, which is where the microbe, where the highest density of microbes are, and this they're making it into our gut. So it's this horizontal gene transfer that takes place, and there's obviously messenger and microRNA information that's sent from these microbes. We're in constant communion with the microbial world in our gut, on our skin. obviously throughout the entire body really, and the outside world. And nature's always finding balance and finding its way back to homeostasis. So if you're eating from the land, you're eating from your own back garden, your back garden's ecosystem is working out how to deal with the chemicals that you are also being exposed to, whether you're breathing them in, whether you're drinking them in the water, whether you're being exposed to them on the skin, whether you're eating them. So it's almost like a supportive, it's like basically it's a way to help restore balance to your own body by eating from your own garden, because you're part of that evolutionary path. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean that's fascinating, and it shows us, I guess, the intelligence of nature and how we are part of it. We are nature, and we're one of the problems, I guess, with the epidemic of disease we're seeing ultimately is that over time we have just increasingly detached from it.
Yeah. So we're disconnected from lots of things, in our own mind, obviously, as well. But the evolutionary process is the thing that I'm really drawing attention to with Biome Box. We're disconnected from the evolutionary adaptation to our environment. And when we're eating foods that are grown in Spain or Africa or even 100 miles away, the genetic information in that food from those microbes, if they have microbes on them at all, obviously the genetic information will still be on it, even if the food's irradiated and the microbes are dead. There's still genetic compounds that will make their way through to your microbiome. But you're basically giving your microbiome an upgrade from the wrong environment. You know, your microbes are being told to upregulate a certain relationship or to control a certain organism, and that may not be a problem in your environment, in your local ecosystem. So this is why I say when we trade and we use foods from abroad or anywhere further, it needs to be a treat. It needs to be a luxury thing. It's to add quality to the life. It's not to add bulk to the diet. The bulk of our diet needs to be from our local environment. And so, yeah, we're separate from this evolutionary process. You know, and the way that medicine has dealt with that pharmaceutically is just with this reductionist approach of just easing the symptoms of that problem. If our bodies can't adapt to a microbe in our system because we're separate from evolutionary adaptation, then we need medicines to try and plug that gap. Maybe we use antibiotics to control an organism instead of having that genetic information activated within our own microbes. And so we've become reliant on man-made symptomatic control for our well-being, but that can never restore health, because health relies us to be a part of evolution. And if you're evolving as a separate unit, not part of your ecosystem, then you're never going to be as vital and healthy as a tree outside or a dandelion. You know, you're going to be always reliant on some kind of chemical or man-made substitute to give you some quality of life. So the Biome Box, I really would like to bring attention to this evolutionary reconnection.
Yeah. Do you have ideas of how you would go about that? So we're talking about, I guess, sort of workshops. Like one of the visions in my mind is, you know, bringing people together on a farm or in a garden and kind of getting involved while educating, which sounds like that's probably part of what you could envision.
Yes. So really it's a re-education or helping people to just go back to simpler ways of interacting with the land. So we have a local farm down the road. It's a couple, well, it's a family farm that they produce regenerative meat, and they had a market garden there, and it's going through a process of evolution, but I'm setting up workshops and an edible forest garden from there to teach the local people about it. So that's something that started in earnest last year, and just getting some momentum of people wanting to know about it, knowing that we're there, and knowing what we're doing. So yeah, so that's like on a micro level for me personally, is just the local farm, planting this edible forest garden, inviting people to learn, local people to learn about that. And then the idea is that we create this mother garden, this edible forest garden that people can collect seeds from, cuttings from, and roots, and take those away and grow those plants in their own gardens and create their own edible garden. So they come along, they can learn what plants are edible, how to prepare them, when to harvest them, what bits of the plant are poisonous, which bits of the plant need to be cooked. Because this knowledge is something that we've all obviously totally become disconnected with. So it's supporting that really. And then when people have got that knowledge, they can then start to grow their own in their own back gardens. But there's some really simple ones that are really, like stinging nettles, just allowing a little patch of stinging nettles to grow. I mean, they're vital for certain species, the life cycle of certain insects, to have nettles. Right. And yet most people just get rid of them, and then they totally wipe out a certain part of a life cycle of a butterfly or a moth. So it's allowing, stinging nettles to grow, and you can harvest stinging nettles in the spring or up until they flower, and they make a really mineral rich soup. I mean, they're not poisonous to eat raw, but obviously you can't because of the stingers. So to deactivate the stingers, you just need to cook them. Right. And then they can be eaten in the same way as you would eat spinach, So people are growing, like buying these seeds for growing spinach and these, F1 sort of, seeds that probably don't do much for the soil. Whereas if they could just eat stinging nettles instead, have that mineral nutrient sort of repletion from the stinging nettles, then nature benefits too, because obviously the nettles form part of the life cycle of the insects, and they form part of the life cycle of the birds and the higher mammals. It's a win-win sort of there, and they're just so easy to grow. I mean, if you have a drought, they don't die, and you don't need to give them food, you don't need to compost them, you don't need to constantly feed them, they're not going to wilt. They find ways of extracting their own nutrients, their root system becomes quite extensive. So there's really simple ways of just starting with one plant or 2 or 3 plants, really easy ones. And dandelions are another one. So the last biome box that we sent out, I put in dandelions. So Andy, the market garden grower, he pulled up all of his dandelions, not all of the dandelions, but he had a huge patch of them. So people got like 2 or 3 big bunches of dandelions, leaves and roots. Huh. There was still way more than he could harvest available. And the roots of dandelions, you can just boil them and then peel the skin off. The skin just slides off once you've boiled them. And they're just used in the same way as carrots or mashed potato.
Oh, wow.
People don't know that about dandelions, because if you ever bitten into a dandelion root, it's extremely bitter. And people are like, I wouldn't eat that. But if you just have a bit of know-how about how you prepare it and how to make it taste good, then people are well away, and they're like, oh, don't pull your dandelions up. The leaves are obviously a bitter salad leaf, which stimulates biorelease and supports detoxification. And they're really loaded in minerals because of the taproot of the dandelion. So, these taprooted plants where their root goes straight down into the ground, goes really deeply, which is why you can never get these weeds out, because their taproot is too long to get the whole thing out. They bring up minerals from right at the bottom of their taproots into their leaves. And when we eat those, we're extracting, nutrients from deep down in the soil, which we couldn't do with modern day vegetables. So they give us access to nutrients that we wouldn't otherwise have. And reintroducing some of these plants allows us to access bitters, which we need in our daily diet. And a lot of people can't stand that bitter flavors anymore, because it's not normal for them anymore. It's just not like, oh, that's bitter. But it's part of our taste palette. And it's part of, that's part of our neurological stimulation. If you never activate the bitter receptors, that's a neurocircuit that you're not using in your brain. So how can you have whole system health if loads of your receptors are going unused in your life? So it's such a holistic picture, isn't it? This trying to live with what nature's offering us and not to select what we think we want. So just introducing things like dandelions and nettles, That's a really, really easy one. Even the blackberry hedges, you know, that are in the hedgerows. If you go down old railway lines, or people go and pick blackberries, but they don't realize that in the spring, when the bright green, the lime green shoots are coming off, that they're rich in protein, and they're also rich in plant growth hormones, and they have an interaction with our biochemistry, probably something to do with our bodies are probably using that. And this is my belief, not a scientifically validated thing. But if you're eating plant growth hormones in the spring, that's got to have some kind of activating process for your own biochemistry, that the warmer days are coming. You don't have to be in hibernation mode anymore. You know, a lot of people spend all year being sluggish, and in this don't come out of hibernation of winter. And I think a lot of it is because the biochemistry is never awoken in early spring, because they're not interacting with nature's awakening plant hormones. So yeah, eating blackberry shoots in the spring, get those plant hormones, those plant growth hormones into your system. It will do something to your metabolism that nature is in control of. We don't understand it fully, and we never will understand the full complexity of that reaction or that interaction. So yeah, I do little foraging walks from the farm that I'm based at, just teaching people about those really common ones. Even in the winter, there's things around, like the wild strawberry leaves. They're really rich in vitamin C, and you can put them in salads, and they're there in the winter. So there's stuff that you can have all year round to sort of give your bacteria a little bit of a helping hand in your gut, even when you're not growing any vegetables, you know, otherwise. So the wild foods are there all year round, which is another key thing.
Yeah.
And obviously they're all much higher in these polyphenolic compounds, because they're plants that are built to survive. So they've got all of these secondary, tertiary, quaternary compounds in them, to really help them to overcome and grow beyond any competing plants. So we're disconnected from that too when we're just eating cultivated vegetables.
Okay. That's really interesting. I totally believe your theory around, you know, plant growth hormones, and I'm sure plenty of other things they're an input for us around, you know, our circannual rhythms ultimately. Same thing as light. We're being informed what time of day it is with light. Well, surely food is telling us what time of year it is ultimately. That intuitively makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. It's that I suppose it's that biochemistry version of light, isn't it? So you know, you've got light in its photon sense, but then you've got the crystalline manifest version of that light and what that means at that time of year. So you know, these plant compounds, these growth hormones, are a denser version of what the light is already communicating to us. So it's a way of taking that into your body and embodying the light of spring, for example.
I forget the name of the guy, but he is the sort of researcher that has I think sort of theorized around the cell danger response. And you know, he certainly talks about how we do have two metabolisms ultimately, one that is designed for sort of winter and one for summer. And again, that input should be very different. But I think when we're on the topic of testing and sort of physiology, we know that it oscillates or should oscillate with the seasons based on light and food and probably other inputs as well. But I guess a lot of us, because as you say, you know, we're eating the same foods throughout the entire year from different locations around the world, we've kind of lost that seasonality to our physiology as well.
Yeah. I mean, the seasonality kind of part is, I mean, people are being encouraged to eat seasonally because of it's obviously greener in terms of if we eat seasonally, then we're eating more locally. But it's just so much beyond that. It's connecting us on a fractal, you know, everything's got this fractal pattern. And if you're eating seasonally on one level, it doesn't just translate as a connecting you with that particular cycle in nature. There's cycles within cycles within cycles that connects you to. And if you're disconnected from that particular cycle, then think how far through your bodily systems, your emotional system, you know, your mind, Yes, it runs through. It's like, you know, cutting through a stick of rock. It's sort of it runs all the way through all of it, but it goes from different densities of I suppose frequency, if you want to call it that. You know, a bee can see light that we can't, because its sensory receptors pick up frequencies of light different to ours. A dog can smell different smells to us because it's got a different sensitivity. And the same thing is when we're eating with the seasons, we're on a gross level connecting with the seasons and what's growing at this time of year, but on a subtle level that we can't pick up with our senses, but is still picked up by our body on some level, is there's other cycles that it's connecting us to as well. And you know, we just don't understand. We can't, because we don't even have the senses to pick that up. But yeah, so seasonality is just so crucial for being connected to the cyclical nature of evolution and growth, expansion of life. You know?
It's beautiful and inspiring. Is there anything else, Terri, that sort of comes to mind or that you would like to share?
I mean, with Biome Box, my whole point for that is to help inspire people to grow their own edible systems and to support nature through what they can do. And so ideally, I would like people to find out what they can. So we've got this whole thing of the microbiome and the gut health, and there's so many people interested in that. But the more you go down the rabbit hole scientifically to look at that, the further you get from actually understanding what your role is in moving into greater harmony, because we're using our minds far too much in some ways and nowhere near enough in others. But it's a balanced picture of, whenever you're learning something, make sure it's then put into action physically. Don't just keep learning. What the earth and the land and our bodies need from us at this time is to be learning and putting that into practice, learning and putting it into practice, and connecting that with a cyclical learning too. So, you know, the plants that grow in spring are different to the plants that grow in winter. You know, the plants that grow that when you harvest plants under a full moon, the compounds in it are different to the compounds that you would get in a leaf that you harvest at new moon, for example. There's all these cycles and influences affecting us, and there's so much to learn. But what I'd really like to encourage through our business and through when I speak is for people to really take that knowledge and apply it in their own lives. And with the gardens, I mean, it's just something as simple as, even if you don't not got much space, or you really don't want wild plants in your garden, just have a pot in a corner with nettles in it. They'll grow, they'll do fine, even if you don't water them. But that's like, you know, this, I've put something being put into action. There's some kind of physical movement taking place as a result of all these ideas that are going on in the world. And we're going through a really exciting time in terms of everyone's kind of having realizations about how things have been bad for them that they've been doing. You know, they've been going down the wrong path with things. It seems to be this huge shift in understanding of our place on the planet and in relationship with nature, with obviously we are nature, but in relationship with the microbes and with the gut microbiome. And so this excitement about the gut microbiome and the fact that it holds all this capacity for healing all kinds of conditions. You know, people can heal eczema and asthma and autoimmune diseases, and as you know, with healing the gut microbiome. But how we heal the gut microbiome is not as straight cut as the theories keep making out. Theoretically, you know, it's just diversity, but how do you actually restore that diversity? And eventually it comes down to, we need a balance between the physical world, the emotional world, the mental world, and there needs to be something beyond ourselves, something unknown. Call that the spiritual dimension. There needs to be something that is more than us, that, because we can't know everything. There are parts of existence that we don't know, that is beyond us, and that something, the inspiration, the muse comes from. This emergence can come from too, of ideas and ways forward that we hadn't thought of before. And so in terms of the microbiome and gut health and the plants and what we're eating, it's trying to incorporate more balance into those things. So yes, education is important, and I obviously think that's a crucial piece of the puzzle, but don't engage with education just for the sake of learning some more theory, because what the earth really needs from all of us right now is to be connecting with evolution and being part of evolution. Because if we're not, then we're going to be reliant on technologies for our health. And yes, technologies are helpful as a crutch to help plug the gap, but we're really being invited into evolutionary processes and being part of that co-creative evolutionary path. So an evolution requires that we have our hands in the dirt. It does require us to engage with the earth. So we have lots of people who have amazing, inspiring ideas, lots of education, lots of online courses, lots of online social media platform conversations taking place, really inspiring sharing and commitments to sort of support one another. But we really need to start bringing that down and asking, how does that translate into our engagement with the soil, with the land? Having sort of communal growing spaces is helpful, but you can even just your own growing space. If you're a private person, you don't like community, because some people don't, they like to be in their own space. Just growing that, that edible garden and consuming it and being part of the evolutionary process so that their bodies can upgrade, and that we're not regressing into this diseased state, because that's what's happening currently. Is we've got this big regression of human health, largely because we're disconnected from evolutionary adaptation. Yeah. And so that's what I really would like to see is more connection with bringing these ideas into the earth. Really. Yeah.
That's powerful. Thank you for sharing, Terri. I am with Biome Box. You'd mentioned that one of the things you've started with the farm close to you is people able to come get some sort of trimmings and take them back so they can grow them.
Yes.
Is that something that you're able to do sort of through Biome Box as well? If people can't come to you, are there any other kind of alternatives if people want to start growing some of these?
I'm working on that. I'm working on so there are companies that sell these perennial vegetables and wild edibles. They grow them and sell them. I don't know if many are aware of this, but actually there's so many more. The regulations on plant nurseries and things now are getting really, tyrannical is the only word I could use. I'm not even allowed to give a plant to a neighbor without being registered to do so, because of this control of plant diseases. It's really not a helpful law. It's kind of holding a lot of, it solves one particular very narrow problem and creates 10,000 times more of a problem, as most of the laws that are being brought in today around health and things are. So just in terms of this One Health policy and whatnot going on with animals and people and the regulations going on, but that's another tangent. But the solutions that we're coming up with are with such a limited understanding of the way things actually work that we're making more of a mess with all the control than by actually supporting greater diversity and plant sharing and people growing stuff. So it's made it difficult for me I'd like to set up a plant nursery that supplies the perennials so people can set up their own. And obviously that would take a bit of legwork. There are plant nurseries that are already doing that. One company is called Incredible Vegetables, but they sell out as soon as they advertise any plants at all. So they'll put on maybe 20 different varieties of perennial vegetables. We've got stock. And then as soon as they put that announcement out there, you've got like 2 hours of the website being totally clogged because you can't get on. And then by the time you get through, everything's sold out.
Wow.
So this is so there is a demand for these perennials. And so I'm working on how can we support people getting access to them and setting up their own. And I'm just developing a year-long program of Plant Your Own Forest Garden, which would be sort of one plant per month. But obviously, sourcing the seeds and the plants and things for each of those months is not easy at the moment, even though these plants are commonplace. It's all the laws and the legal restrictions that are causing issues. Okay. So we're working towards all of that. But at the moment, I mean, there's loads of plants that you could order the seeds from just a normal, seed supplier. I mean, there's good companies like Real Seeds. Chiltern Seeds are quite good as well. But it's just, there's so many books on these perennial plants now, edible plants. When I first started researching it, there was about 4 books. And now there's like 20 to 30 that sort of go into them. So these books are around, and I'd really advise, this is the leading edge of health, really. This is leading edge of microbiome and gut health, is people who are trying to grow on their own land or in their own communities as much diverse plants as many diverse plants as possible. And another thing is to really engage with the wild spaces and learn about the wild edibles and protect the wild edible spaces as well. But by protect, I don't mean this is a conservation space, human beings aren't allowed, because that's what's happening on a big scale, which is another one of the things that's going to cause a huge problem, is this the conservation laws. But yes, so trying to find wild spaces and learning about what you can eat in the wild is a really good way of starting things off. Going on foraging courses and stuff like that are really helpful. And as I said, if you can try and work together with your community to create wild edible spaces that are protected in the sense of human beings are allowed access to them and to eat from them, and are actively stewarding that land to ensure the wild diversity continues, then that would be a great thing to do as well.
Brilliant. I think that's really exciting. And I think it's so nice to hear that, some of those companies are getting sold out so quickly. As you say, it shows there's a demand and an interest there.
Yes.
It's really nice to hear.
Yeah.
Brilliant, Terri. I'm mindful of time. So thank you so much for sharing your journey, your knowledge, your wisdom. I think it's going to really resonate with a lot of people, especially our kind of audience. So thank you so much for sparing the time. Where can people find you in regards to kind of websites, social media, if people want to reach out or learn more about your work? What are the best ways?
Well, we're on, obviously the website is the main one, so that's just it's my biome box. So, but it's obviously difficult to spell it, isn't it? Because everyone sort of spells biome strangely. So it's my MY, and it's biome BIOME box box.co.uk. We're on Instagram as my biome box as well, so we can connect on there. But best is to connect through the website, really, or search for my biome box in Google and we'll come up there. And I'm happy to chat to anybody about collaboration. I mean, we're it's just me and my partner and some people from the farm that are helping me to run the Biome Box. So we're really open to collaboration right now, you know, creating courses together with other people. We're looking for growers. People want to grow for us. So a big part of our sort of sticky points is that in order to sell the produce, we've first got to grow the produce. And I've got a situation where I could sell a lot of boxes, but if I do it with integrity and properly, I've got to wait, 1 to 2 years before we can sell really anything from new growers. So I limit the number of sales that we have to what our growers can cope with. And so we've got the demand there for these perennial veg boxes, but we need more growers. And so this is one of the things I set up Biome Box for, was to create more revenue, more income for people who have got their hands in the soil, so that enables more people to be on the ground putting these ideas into physical practice. And so we've got more market garden growers. So yeah, if anybody's interested in growing the perennials, you don't need to be an experienced grower or anything like that. We supply from people's back gardens. We've got a medicinal herbalist, and she's got a little edible herb garden, and she supplies from there little sort of bouquets of unusual herbs. So yeah, I'm open to all kinds of collaboration and ways to take this forward, and ways the company can grow and evolve. So yeah, just reach out.
Excellent. And I'll share those links in the show notes, and I'll let people know the collaboration. So if whatever people haven't managed it to the end, they'll know about the opportunity as well. So thanks, Terri. It's been so nice.
Lovely. Thank you, Alex. Yeah, that's really lovely to speak to you. And thank you for having me on.
Pleasure.
Okay. All right.